do when it works genuinely in an open way with stakeholders. And we would like to see that agenda of opening up and being more transparent pushed further at Plenipod next year. We would like the ITU to recognize much more explicitly the roles and mandates of other organizations, especially in the internet space, and build more genuine and reciprocal partnerships with them, not pretending that they don't exist in ITU resolutions, for example. And we also, I think someone else on the panel mentioned this, we really want the ITU to continue to be an effective global champion of the role that ICTs can play in sustainable development. And actually, we think the SDGs do not reflect the importance of ICTs for development as much as they should, and there is a lot more that the ITU needs to do in New York and globally in order to make sure that ICTs are absolutely at the heart of the Sustainable Development Agenda. So there is a really important job for the ITU to be doing, but the ITU needs to change in some important ways if it's going to do that job as well as it should be. Thanks.
Any reactions from the panel? Robert?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I would agree. Actually, that's a great sort of shopping list, if you will, of when I talked about modernization, and particularly the cooperation with other agencies. And when you talk about the SDGs, excuse me, you know, SDG 9 is essentially the infrastructure, which is the link back directly to the ITU. But one of the, and so people were actually very concerned that it was just off in a corner. But if you think about it, a lot of the conversation and subsequent work on the SDGs recognizes that it's not necessarily what we call it ICTs, but digital technology, it becomes horizontal and has a potential positive effect across virtually every one of the SDGs, whether it's education, health, food security, water security, et cetera. And one of the questions, and this is why what you're pointing out is being, I think, so important in terms of cooperation across many of the UN agencies, is in the future, as we think about this, does it really need to be sort of the sort of technology embedded in only one organization for the UN family, or does it need to be horizontally across every UN organization in order to use and benefit from the technology? And I think that's a major sort of future structural question. And again, on those types of issues, if you were, Richard, you know, going through the thought exercise of, you know, sort of not having something starting with a blank piece of paper, how would you organize it? And, you know, and you could end up on those things with, you know, chief technology officers in every UN agency talking about how do you use technology for the mission of the, not just the agency like internally, but externally to meet the goals, whether it's the food organization, development organization, healthcare, et cetera. And that's kind of different, but that does not mean that you would not want still the coordination of some kind for the other issues within the ITU. I do think that a number of people talked about, you know, the transparency, the access to information, and a genuine consensus process built upon a multi-stakeholder process in which all of the stakeholders actually have a seat at the table, including council working groups. Because a lot of the work that gets done is at the council working group level. Again, these are the types of really important questions that we need to be addressing when we're talking about an ITU for the 21st century. Change is always difficult. And in any large organization, change is really difficult. But I think that's a great sort of shopping list and to-do list, and I think, I hope the UK puts those kinds of things on the agenda for the Plenipod.
I also wanted to echo some of Paul's excellent points, particularly want to underscore the fact, and I think this is something that all of the panelists here have reflected on, is the fact that the ITU does do very important work. It does have a very important role in legal, in technical capacity building, in the work of spectrum management and allocation. These are crucial areas. And so I think the concern comes when it, I mean, it can really be boiled down to mandate when we see that the ITU is moving into areas in which it does not have the capacity or the expertise. And that is a consequence of its organizational structure, again, as Paul reflected on. And so I think the key issue here is that the ITU is a relevant organization, but its relevance is not derived from its organizational structure. It's derived from its original mandate, its core mandate. And I think that should be the key reflection when we consider the role of the ITU in general, and the idea of inclusiveness and multi-stakeholderism as part of that.
You go first, and then we can.
Okay. No, just a few comments in regard to points that were raised. I want to just reflect. Well, Brazil has been one of the countries that has been supporting consistently expanded participation of non-governmental stakeholders in ITU, internet governance-related discussions. And internally, access to documents is freely given by request. So there is no problem about that. And we think this is totally in line from the foreign affairs perspective with the intent we have to translate to reality the principles that emanate from WIS's full participation of all stakeholders and in their respective roles and responsibilities. So we think it is right fair that in context of ICANN, for example, we are seeking not an enlarged role for government. Sometimes it is misunderstood. We seek within ICANN, from our perspective, to ensure the right, appropriate participation for governments. We think, in spite of the fact that some other people argue that governments have a high status in ICANN, we think that in practice, as we look at the decision-making process, the input from government is sometimes overlooked, and we are trying to look into that. There's some jurisdiction aspects. So I do not want to deviate, but just to say that the same kind of points we raise in the context of ICANN, seeking to make a reality in ICANN, the multi-stakeholder approach with the relevant participation. We also look at it in ITU. We think in ITU, of course, the context is different. I think in ITU it's the opposite. It is the issue is to seek fuller participation of non-governmental stakeholders, and we are fully behind it, because we think in each and every stance, each and every case, the full participation of stakeholders ensures more consistent, more legitimate, more sustainable solutions, and we are in support of that. One thing in relation to Brazil internally is that I would say the same discussion in regard to what is legitimate for ITU to look into those areas is taking place in Brazil, because our legislation is very clear that internet is not telecommunications. It is in law that internet for us is added service. So Anatel, the regulatory agency, does not have a mandate to internet, since it's not telecommunication. But of course, the same discussion that is taking ITU is taking place in Brazil. What are the limits for this? Because there are things that Anatel does legitimately, and ITU as well. And what are the boundaries? Where do you stop? What is totally within the mandate and what is not? So I just like to flag that part of what is also being discussed in Brazil. Thank you.
We had some more, if we can keep it short, we have like only 5-6 minutes left, and then maybe 1 or 2 interventions, and then a closing round.
Well, thank you. My name is Kepaletswe. I'm from Botswana. But, well, I'll speak as an NGO or a civic society rather than as a government official, because it's not a government position. Just to share, having participated in both the ITU and maybe also at ICANN and at other various multi-stakeholders forum, what I have observed coming from a developing countries is we have civic societies which are very, very at an infancy level. They cannot fully participate. We have private sector which cannot fully participate up to this level. So you will find that as government officials, when we come to this forum, there is no our civic society, there is no private sector. So as government official, we almost have to play their role. One of the things which we have been trying most of the time is when we prepare for these conferences, we call for participation. We have multinational companies. One of the things which I have always had a battle with most of them is they participate in the activities in developing countries, but they operate in our market, but they don't participate in the activities in our market so that they can influence the government decisions so that when you go to ITU, you are able to take their views on board. You'll only meet them at the last end when you get to the conference, but they are there operating in the market. And I say to them, when we are doing national preparation, can you come and share your knowledge with us so that at least you enrich the government position so that whatever position they take there, your views are taken on board. But one of the things is we are having that challenge. And I think it's some of those things because we are taking this multi-stakeholder approach that as we are managing the infrastructure back home or regulate it, we are doing it from a multi-stakeholder position that we want everybody to participate. But that participation is very, very leaky. And I think it's one of those things we need to find a gap how we close. Just closing, one of the things which I have realized is in most of these organizations going forward, like Richard has just highlighted is, you know, when we go there, we do not go there to discuss on a consensus. Everybody go there in a locked position that you do not have any discussion. It's just that I say no, I say yes, and that's it. And until you'll spend four weeks, whatever, talking, and at the end of the day, you go back home or whether you vote, which voting does not help because you need a consensus in order to move forward. You know, I know there has been debate about the issue of internet and telecoms, and to me, from a developing country, it has been very difficult because as a telecoms regulator, I'm the one trying to facilitate the connectivity in terms of broadband and access. Yes, in terms of dealing with content regulation of internet, I do not get there. But to separate the internet regulation in terms of access is very difficult to say, now I'm providing you with a telecom access, I'm not providing you with an internet access, because both of them, they are provided on the same platform, and those are the things which we do on a day-to-day basis. So you'll find that it's very difficult to separate some of the issues.
We are running out of time, so we're going to go for a closing round, starting here with Newish, 30 seconds, 1 minute. Sure. You can do it.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, I think talking and having a panel that reflects different stakeholder groups is really important to start talking about the ITU. And I think it seems like we keep coming back to the same ideas, the same issues of stakeholdership and multi-stakeholderism and multi-stakeholder participation, even in multilateral forums. I think we all have different views on structural reform within the ITU and to what extent and what that looks like. But beginning to talk about that, both within the ITU and outside of the ITU, is vitally important. And so I think that's where I'll leave it. Yeah.
Now it works. Thank you. Yeah, it was, I think, a good start of the discussion. I don't think we are at the end of this discussion. That will continue for some time. And I agree, yes, the ITU should make its way into the 21st century, but that goes for all institutions that are older than the 21st century. And so this is a natural challenge that everybody faces. And of course, we have different views in what that means, that the ITU should become let's say, a 21st century institution, and that will be something that we have to discuss. But I think if you want it to be a 21st century institution, you also have to allow the ITU to some extent to experiment like everybody else and find their role. Because if we knew it all now, then we could just say, okay, this is what the ITU is going to do. But that's, I guess, not the case, and it's not the case for any institution. So I think in the end, as I said, it's a member states-driven institution, and if the member states agree, or where the member states agree, then I think this is where the ITU should go. But again, I think one of the key roles is really, and I fully agree with Paul from the UK, there's more that can be done on raising awareness on the importance of ICTs for SDGs. The ITU already does a lot, like nobody else, and it's also up to us to explain to our people in New York that are coming from other ends, that maybe this is not just techie stuff, but this is stuff that really matters. So I think we also, as member states and you as businesses and civil society, you have a role to play in explaining others that don't work with these issues that maybe ICTs can help achieving the SDGs. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I'll just close by saying that the internet is not an issue. It's a number of different issues, a number of ranging from human rights to economic policy to telecom policy. And I think the ITU would do very well to focus on those within its mandate, on infrastructure, on telecoms and communications, and know that it's not alone within the UN system or the broader world. There's a lot of knowledge that other UN agencies hold. There's a lot of resources on how to become more inclusive and open. I just want to point to a report from the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to freedom of expression and opinion, which did a report recently on access to information within international organizations. And I think there's a number of useful recommendations for the ITU there. So I think there's a lot of resources. There's a lot the ITU can do. And I just want to close by saying it would have been great to have the ITU as part of this conversation. Perhaps they're here and we can talk to them afterwards. Thanks.
I want to thank Gus, you and civil society for convening this, because this is actually a really important conversation. And this is a multi-stakeholder conversation. Government, private sector, academics, civil society, et cetera. And that's the conversation we need to have about all of the institutions, right? It's not just the ITU. And it's changing, it's evolving, right? Because in the past, it was only multilateral, only intergovernmental, only government to government. We're in the process of the journey to making it genuinely multi-stakeholder. We're not there yet, but we're on the way. And I think this is a really important conversation. So thank you, and I'm hoping to have this continued.
Thanks, everyone. Just to close, one thing that I'm going to remove my hat as a moderator and talk as also civil society. If you are in a civil society group and you want to engage at the ITU level, be it for Plenipot or other processes, or you want to engage more with your national telecom regulator, please reach out to any of us here at the table that represent civil society. We are happy to help you in the process, and we think it's important. As we're saying, what happens at the telecom regulation level and at the ITU level affects many of the issues that we work on internet governance and human rights. It's not, as we were describing today, it's not super easy to engage, but we can help in that process, and we think that the more the merrier, and we can be more effective and actually transform this necessary organization for some issues. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the panel, for taking the time and joining us, and have a nice day.